Considering my last video was on the first Hello Neighbor and the flaws that the first game had, I thought it'd only be fitting to make a video on the second game, Hello Neighbor 2. Before we start, I would like to say that Hello Neighbor 2 is an improvement over the earlier game, but still has a few issues to work out. That being said, I did find it to be enjoyable and challenging experience, an inventive follow-up to the original Hello Neighbor. One bad thing that Hello Neighbor did not improve on since the last game is, once again, there are no clear instructions or what the objective is or anything. So once again, to complete the game, a guide was needed. Hello Neighbor 2 started off with a pre-alpha called Hello Guest. A new character called the Guest is introduced into the series now. The Guest is an unknown entity in the Hello Neighbor lore. It is described as a greedy and envious being that takes what it thinks people do not deserve. The Guest is often called the Raven Man, a figure that is rumored to haunt the town of Raven Brooks and cause strange events to occur. The true identity and motivations of the Guest remain a mystery, which leads back to the appearance of a raven that was a symbol in the first game. The game starts off with two different clickable clipboards, each with a different player you can choose, Beatrix and Quentin. The character you play doesn't affect anything except for minor cutscene differences, player run speed, and player jump height. The original cutscene will show the player putting on a bike helmet and cycling down to an abandoned amusement park where they will open the gate and use the map to figure out where they have to go. You take the night shift as a security guard in the abandoned Golden Apple amusement park, where a creature is hiding in the shadows. You must take risks to protect and secure the furthest corner of the park from vandals. You need to follow the map until you reach a small hut where a phone will be ringing. When you answer the phone, you'll be given instructions on what needs to be done next, which is to start your shift, and check the top of the mountain where the player will see a figure of the raven falling apart. Technically, there are two endings to this, a good ending and a bad ending. The bad ending consists of the player getting caught by the Guest many times, showing a cutscene where you can see the player waking up from the floor and turning off an alarm clock. The player will get up from the floor and be given a paycheck, and you can start the next shift. The good ending consists of the player completing all the challenges and puzzles through the pre-alpha, which at the end will show a mysterious figure approaching the player and grabbing them, which ends the pre-alpha. There was also an Alpha 2 for Hello Guest that was supposed to be released, but unfortunately it never saw the eye of the public. All that remains of this alpha are screenshots that were released back in December of 2019. The screenshots showed some sort of house that would probably be implemented into the amusement park. Not much is known about it, but it is most likely going to take place right after the Alpha 1 unused extended ending. It's a shame tinyBuild did not continue on this idea of Hello Guest. Now we move on to Hello Neighbor 2 Alpha 1. Quentin is in Raven Brooks to investigate the current whereabouts of Theodore Peterson, who had disappeared from the public eye. From his binoculars, he spots the Guest locking up what he presumes is Mr. Peterson in the attic of his own house. After locking the door with a red lock, the Guest hangs the key to the attic in a furnace before lighting up the fire inside to ensure no one could try and take the key. You will notice that the house being used here is in fact the same house from the previous game, which is completely run down and destroyed. This is because Hello Neighbor 2 is taking place right after Act 2 from the first game, where Nikki is able to call the police, so the neighbor has to hide elsewhere. The house is in fact different and is guarded by the Guest. If you are caught by the Guest, he will throw you back outside and your inventory gets emptied out. While evading him, Quentin has to find a way to put out the furnace to get the key that is hidden, and now I will be lying if I said I knew what I was doing, so once again I had to look up a guide. I started off by grabbing the camera and the screen from the van and climbing to the upstairs where there is a door locked by a keypad. By placing the camera behind, you can watch the Guest put in the code. When he has left, you can put in the code, which will give you access to the room where the crowbar is so that you can tear the boards off from the attic door. You will need to climb the abandoned house right beside and collect the rope from the very top. Then you can use the rope to go back and collect the fire extinguisher, which is in the smaller tower behind the house. This will be needed to pull out the furnace and grab the key. Make sure to go back to get the rope so you can unlock the attic by swinging down. Also, may I just add that there is a generator you can grab by the supermarket, but I never knew what it was supposed to be used for. You are now finally able to enter the attic. While exploring the attic, he discovers a costume that resembles that of the Guest, which is stored in a locker. After picking it up and heading back outside, Mr. Peterson, who somehow managed to escape, can be found staring up at Quentin, while the mysterious man in the hat from Hello Guest can also be seen nearby a lamppost as a strong and mysterious wind occurs. After Quentin jumps out, the game ends with the screen cuts to white with a message saying, "You win." Now we move on to what I consider the most difficult and worst Alpha, 1.5. I generally wasn't looking to playing this considering it took me 4.2 hours to complete the first time I ever tried, but this would have to be done at some point. Quentin is in his van, parked not far from what was once the house of Theodore Peterson. He takes a glimpse of a missing poster with the missing person being Theodore. Quentin sets the poster aside and goes to drink some tea, when he hears a loud shatter from the house. He looks over and grabs his camera display to see what happened. He sees the guest throwing away items into the furnace from the last game. Looking back up, Quentin sees three children dressed for Halloween who walk up to the front of the door of the house. The guest crawls on top of the roof as it goes to grab the kids. A missing poster flies into Quentin's face with each of the three kids on it. He brushes it away and sees the guest with a large trash bag and he takes up to the attic. Now, the house is the exact same from Alpha 1, but the interior has been completely changed. The objective stays the same: to find a way into the attic, and having to turn off the furnace for the key remains the same. Starting off, the fire extinguisher is needed. To get it, you have to climb onto the tree that is on the side of the house, and by throwing an object in between the two boards, you can make the conveyor belt turn the other direction. This will allow you to sneak into the room with the fire extinguisher and steal it. The extinguisher has a very important role now, as you can use it to propel yourself further distances upwards. It'll also be needed to put out the furnace again. Just like the last alpha, the rope is also on the same abandoned house. This time, the generator on top of the supermarket is needed so that you can get the crowbar this time. Plug it in and turn it on and push the crowbar onto the conveyor and stop the generator when it reaches outside and grab it. Around the map, there are sweets that you'll have to pick up. This will be needed for the attic much later on. After breaking into the attic, you will see two fake versions of the children that were seen in the beginning of the game. Place the 5 sweets that you have found into the sack in front of them to reveal the ending. At some point, the lights start to flicker, and you can see Mr. Peterson just trying the handle, then violently banging on the door for help. The feed cuts out, and a different cutscene begins. Quentin is now seen in his office watching all the events from a computer screen. He hears a knock on the door and decides to grab a pumpkin basket and head out. He is stopped in his tracks when the knocking gets louder and the game cuts to a screen saying, "How was your weather?" One thing I do have to praise Hello Neighbor 2 for is the fact that there is a lot more exploration added into the game. Being freely able to walk around the map and explore different places was a great addition and an improvement from the last. Quentin starts off by arriving at Raven Brooks and noting down the cases in his journal. After a very brief transition, Quentin is now sitting in his van at night looking out for anything suspicious. He hears the sound of struggling that immediately caught his attention. The sounds were coming from none other than Mr. Peterson, who was seen dragging Aaron back inside. Quentin takes photos of the incident occurring, and Mr. Peterson sees this. Shortly after, Mr. Peterson jumps back outside with a shovel and starts walking towards the van. Startled, Quentin tried to rush and almost dropped his car keys. Speeding off, the neighbor manages to break the window. Quentin is seemingly home free until the guest appears in the middle of the road, startling Quentin and sending his van hurtling into the wall of a nearby barn. He survives this, and this leads us to a short tutorial. The tutorial teaches us the very basics of the game and shows new mechanics. After Quentin is able to escape the barn, however, he is hit over the head with a shovel by Mr. Peterson, who also steals his camera. The next morning, Quentin wakes up in Ravenbrook's office with a CCTV screen turned on all of a sudden. The screen showed the Peterson residence that is now full of police, and Mr. Peterson is nowhere to be seen. Curious, he goes to investigate the residence that is being guarded by a police officer. The main goal inside of the house is to find a way into the basement that is being locked by 4 keys. To find the 4 keys, several puzzles have to be solved around the house, including finding pieces of the newspaper that are scattered around. After all of the problem solving, Quentin is able to make his way inside the basement, where he finds sheets, toys, and a newspaper clipping about the closing of a local Ravenbrooks museum. Underneath the newspaper clipping is a red key, which opens up the cellar door to the basement. When Quentin leaves, however, a paper aeroplane hits him, made from one of the missing posters. Said paper airplane contains a cry for help written on the back, with a trail of even more airplanes leading Quentin directly to the museum. When he reaches the inside of the museum, a lock is on the door that prohibits him from entering. There is also a shovel nearby, but when Quentin goes to reach in for it, he remembers the shovel and passes out. He seemingly wakes up at the office at night. Quentin has a nightmare before waking up to the reality where he sees the CCTV cameras have changed and are now showing the bakery. Quentin decides to head to the bakery to investigate. Yet again, he finds the bakery to be rigged with various puzzles designed to protect the code for her register. Around the bakery, you have to find the missing button so that you can type in the code and open the cash register to find the key. After obtaining the key, you can head up to the museum where you can now unlock the door and go inside. You'll find Mr. Peterson hiding inside after the fear of the police being able to find him, as well as an attic door that has been protected by 3 missing taxidermy heads. Upon further exploration, Quentin finds the room to the bedroom, and inside lies a Peterson family photo that Quentin picks up. When Quentin picks up the family photo, however, he is suddenly launched into another nightmare. This time he finds himself on the other end of the camera, photographing Aaron and Mr. Peterson standing in front of the Peterson household. Suddenly, dark clouds begin to form in the sky as Quentin notices another plea for help scrawled across Aaron's shirt as the boy begins to cry. As the rain starts, Mr. Peterson drags Aaron back inside, and Quentin tries to chase after him, but can't as the storm intensifies. He suddenly wakes back up in the office, and the screens have changed once again, showing the local taxidermist where you'll have to head out this time. Once again, another house riddled with puzzles, this time to protect the code to the safe the taxidermist had buried in his yard. Digging up the safe from outside and putting in the code allowed to once again find another key for a room in the museum. That night, Quentin returns to the museum once more. After solving a few puzzles to find another code to the safe, Quentin finally discovers his lost camera waiting inside. Accidentally flashing himself with the camera sends Quentin into another nightmare, beginning with him opening the doors to the museum. Inside, he sees the overhead crow dropping more and more coins and eventually setting itself free and flying right into him. On the fourth and final day, the CCTV screens now show the mayor's house, in which, as you can guess, is the next target. By collecting all of the trophies, you can unlock the secret room behind the bookshelf that allows you to collect the final key for the museum. On the final night, Quentin makes a return to the museum, where this time he is able to get the final animal head that unlocks the attic. Once in the attic, there is a key right next to a cell where you can unlock it and interact with Aaron. As you are freeing him, however, the neighbor catches you and ends up locking you in the cell instead. When Quentin wakes up, he finds the cell having been secured with a reverse number lock, with the code scattered around the cell. Opening the lock and making his way back into the museum, he finds himself against a far more aggressive Mr. Peterson, determined to prevent him from leaving at all costs. Quentin persists, however, and manages to get the items needed to unlock the door to the museum. As the door is opened, Quentin mentions to Aaron, who is hiding under one of the displays, to come out and follow him. However, just as they're about to leave, Mr. Peterson comes thundering down the steps, furious. Just as he's about to reach Quentin, the crow statue hanging from the ceiling suddenly falls off and crushes him under his weight. Aaron is horrified, and despite Quentin's attempt to console him and leave, Aaron runs to his father and embraces him. In the meantime, a mysterious figure hits Quentin in the head and drags him along while he watches Aaron trying to help his father.